Every December, as the world fills with lights, music, and the comforting lie that winter is gentle, a familiar figure returns to our imagination. Santa Claus. To most of us, he belongs to childhood, to stories told softly before sleep, to red suits and shopping mall photos. But what if Santa was never meant to be just a story? What if, hidden beneath centuries of myth, there exists a darker, older presence? One that people have claimed to see with their own eyes. Tonight, on World Mysteries, we invite you to suspend disbelief, just for a moment, and listen carefully. Because across continents, cultures, and centuries, thousands of people, adults, soldiers, pilots, police officers, and entire families have reported encounters with something they could not explain. Encounters with a figure who looked exactly like Santa Claus, but felt terrifyingly real. The earliest recorded sightings do not come from children, but from monks and chroniclers in medieval Europe. In a 13th century manuscript preserved in Bavaria, a winter traveler describes meeting a tall, bearded man in furred garments, bearing bells and a sack, who walked unharmed through snowstorms that felled horses and men alike. The writer noted that the stranger's footprints did not sink into the snow. He also wrote something chilling. I felt watched, as though the man knew my name before I spoke it. These words were not written as folklore, but as a warning. Centuries later, during the long winters of colonial America, similar accounts emerged. In 1720, a family in rural Pennsylvania recorded in their journal that on Christmas Eve, someone knocked once on their door. When the father opened it, no one stood there. Only a bundle of carved wooden toys, warm to the touch, despite the freezing night. The next morning, the children were found standing silently by the fireplace, claiming a red man with iron eyes had watched them sleep. The journal ends abruptly that year. No further entries were ever found. One of the most unsettling patterns in these sightings is consistency. Across time and geography, witnesses describe the same details: a towering figure, a heavy fur cloak or coat, boots that make no sound on snow, a deep voice that seems to echo even when spoken softly, and most disturbingly, the eyes. Many witnesses describe them not as kind or jolly, but ancient, knowing, as if they were looking through you, not at you. In 1951, a U.S. Air Force radar operator stationed in Alaska reported tracking an unidentified moving object on Christmas Eve. It did not behave like an aircraft. It changed direction instantly, accelerated without heat signature, and vanished near the Arctic Circle. When the operator joked that it must be Santa Claus, his commanding officer reportedly went pale and ordered the logs sealed. Decades later, through declassified documents, researchers discovered this was not an isolated incident. Similar radar anomalies appeared every December across multiple northern defense systems. Always the same night. Always the same path. But the sightings are not limited to technology. In 1978, a group of truck drivers traveling through northern Canada stopped after seeing a figure walking along the highway in a blizzard. They described him as massive, wearing red fur-lined clothing, carrying a sack over his shoulder. Concerned, one driver stepped out to offer help. The figure turned slowly. One witness later said, "I knew instantly we were not supposed to see him." The air reportedly felt heavy, as though sound itself had been muted. When the drivers looked back after blinking, the figure was gone. The sack remained imprinted in the snow, but no footprints led away from it. Children, too, have described encounters that go far beyond imagination. Psychologists note that children across cultures tend to imagine Santa differently, until they describe him after a supposed real encounter. Then, the descriptions converge. In a 1994 study of unexplained childhood experiences, dozens of children from different countries described waking on Christmas Eve to see a tall man standing silently near the doorway, never approaching the bed, never smiling. One child said, "He wasn't there to give me anything. He was checking." When asked what he was checking for, the child replied, "If I remembered him." Even more disturbing are accounts from adults who encountered Santa-like figures during moments of crisis. In 2004, after a deadly avalanche in the Alps, A lone survivor claimed he was guided out of the storm by a large bearded man wearing fur and bells. The man walked ahead of him for hours, never speaking. When rescue teams later asked the survivor to describe his guide, he broke down crying and said, "I don't think he was human. I think he was older than the mountain." No footprints were found alongside the survivor's path, only his own. Folklorists argue that Santa Claus may be a modern mask worn by something far older. Long before Christmas, northern cultures spoke of winter gods and watchers, entities that traveled during the darkest nights to observe humanity. Odin, the wild huntsman, the Yule Father. These beings were not gentle gift givers. They judged. They remembered. They punished forgetfulness and rewarded respect. Over time, as societies softened their myths, the sharp edges were filed down. Fear was replaced with cheer. Bells replaced chains. But perhaps the entity itself never changed. One recurring detail appears in modern police reports. In 2012, a small town in Minnesota reported a series of break-ins on Christmas Eve. Nothing was stolen. Instead, officers found fireplaces disturbed, ash arranged into circular patterns, and strange symbols pressed into soot, symbols resembling ancient runes. One officer wrote in his report that he felt unwelcome in the homes, as if someone else had already inspected them. Surveillance cameras recorded brief static disturbances at exactly midnight. No suspects were identified. The case was quietly closed. Why do these sightings happen only at certain times? Why Christmas Eve? Some researchers believe it has less to do with the holiday and more to do with the winter solstice, a moment when ancient cultures believed the boundary between worlds thinned, a night when watchers could cross more easily. If that is true, then Santa Claus may not be coming for us, but through us, passing briefly into our world as he always has. Perhaps the most chilling accounts come from people who were not believers at all. Skeptics, scientists, soldiers. In 2018, a satellite technician reviewing archival footage noticed an anomaly. A humanoid heat signature moving across the Siberian tundra at impossible speed. The timestamp? December 24th, exactly 23:59. The figure vanished seconds before midnight. When the technician shared the footage with colleagues, he was advised to drop it. He later resigned. So what are we to make of this? Is Santa Claus a shared hallucination? A cultural echo? Or something far more unsettling, a real entity shaped by belief, sustained by memory, and empowered by centuries of attention? If he is not real, why do the stories align so closely? Why do witnesses describe fear more often than joy? And why does the figure always seem aware, deeply, personally aware of those who see him? As you listen to this, somewhere in the world, snow is falling. Somewhere, a child is staring at the dark, convinced someone is standing just out of sight. Somewhere, a radar screen flickers for reasons no one can explain. Maybe Santa Claus is not a visitor from the North Pole. Maybe he is a reminder, a watcher from an older world, still making his rounds, still keeping his list, not of gifts, but of those who remember the old rules. And now, before we end, we turn the question to you. Have you ever felt watched on Christmas Eve? Have you heard footsteps when no one was there, or found something placed where it should not be? Share your experience in the comments below. At World Mysteries, we read every story, because sometimes the truth reveals itself not in textbooks, but in whispers shared across the dark. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, like, subscribe, and stay with us. Because the night is long, winter is watching, and some legends never stopped being real.